Hello! Nick bought me this tiny little Art Toolkit pocket palette for Christmas, and today I'm going to finally fill it up with paints. Let's get into it! So when I say it's tiny, it really is. It's the size of a business card holder, and I ended up getting the black one. There's also a silver as well, but I do love the black. It's got Art Toolkit on the bottom of it. There's a little clasp here, and it opens up. Inside is a little business card that we'd picked up as well. There is a small area for mixing, it's very tiny, and 28 little quarter pans, I would say these are. If I pull a couple out, this whole thing in here is a magnet, and then these are just little metal trays. They're very tiny. So I'm probably not even going to label the small quarter pans, I'm just going to fill them with paint in an order. I have been racking my brains trying to pick 28 paints to put in here, and I think I'm going to go with mostly Daniel Smith, but I might also add in a few Schmincke as well. So I shall get squeezing. Oh, I really hope I make the right decision. It's always so difficult to know which colours to put in, but I will show you all of the colours that I've chosen, and then I will swatch everything out once I've squeezed everything into the pans so we can see what the colour palette looks like. The reason I'm going with Daniel Smith paints is because I do have quite a lot of them, as well as Schmincke, but also Daniel Smith and Schmincke paints dry really well into pans, whereas honey-based paints such as M.Graham and Sennelier just tend to not set at all, and I do want to travel around with this in a bag, so I thought I would go for ones that I know will set and won't just run everywhere. I actually found a use for these little journaling cards though. If you remember, I bought some of these a while ago and I was wondering what to do with them. They actually make quite nice little swatch cards, and I've been painting out a few different ones just to try out different colour combinations to see what I might like. I've gone off my two large palettes of paints here. This is my Schmincke one, and I also have my Daniel Smiths, which are upside down. There we go. So in here, it's completely full of Schmincke. And just trying to pick 28 is always really difficult, but I really love travelling with Daniel Smith paints as well. My set of Daniel Smiths is not quite complete. I do have space for a few more of them, so I've been trying to pick colours from them. I did initially think I might go entirely with Daniel Smith, and I painted out a couple of different combinations here of paints that I might like, and then I thought maybe I could try the Schmincke ones, so I've got a Schmincke palette of colours that I thought could potentially work. There were just a few in this set which I like better than the Daniel Smiths. One is this cobalt turquoise and also this quinacridone purple. These are really great colours, so I think I'm going to end up using a few Schmincke ones, but probably mostly Daniel Smiths. And then I did a couple of Schmincke and Daniel Smith combos. Here's the first one, which I decided wasn't quite right because that Potter's Pink was annoying me up in that corner. I almost went with this one, which is option B, but I just am not happy with that Azo yellow sitting there. I think I just wanted to change my mind on that one. So I have come up with what I am pretty sure is going to be my final palette of colours, and I am just going to have to start pouring them, otherwise I will change my mind again. I actually swapped out the Azo yellow for the Aussie Red Gold because it's just one of my favourite colours and I always end up using it. So this is probably the palette I'm going to go for. I've ruled out a lot of these cards and I'm quite sick of it, so I think I'm just going to make a decision and go with it. So I've laid all of the colours out so I can't change my mind again. And I will just quickly read out which ones I have decided to choose. Going with a Schmincke Ruby Red Deep, then we have Daniel Smith Quinacridone Rose, Pyrrole Red, Schmincke Transparent Orange, Daniel Smith Aussie Red Gold, New Gamboge, Lemon Yellow, Green Gold, Phthalo Yellow Green, Phthalo Green Yellow shade, oh my gosh, say that 5 times fast, Sap Green and Perylene Green. I wanted to have a nice range of greens in here today because I'm always whinging about not having enough of them. Phthalo Turquoise, Schmincke Cobalt Turquoise, and then back to Daniel Smith, Manganese Blue Hue, Phthalo Blue Green Shade, Ultramarine Blue, Enden Throne Blue, Carbazole Violet, another Schmincke Quinacridone Purple, Opera Pink in Daniel Smith, a Schmincke Potter's Pink, Buff Titanium, Mont Amiata Natural Sienna, Schmincke Burnt Sienna, Burnt Umber, Sepia and Neutral Tint. Now I need to get squeezing these large tubes into these tiny little half band things, quarter bands actually. This is going to be fun. I think I'm going to be needing some tools here. This metal tool is usually quite good just to help get the paint out. Oh boy, I'm going to make a mess, aren't I? I actually did alright with these today and managed to get all of them in without making an enormous mess. I guess over the years of pouring many pans, I've gotten a lot better at it. That metal tool also works really well and is great for precision work, like taking off the paint from the tube and mixing it up so it's nice and smooth in the pan. It's one of those needle tools used for clay sculpting and pottery, so it has multiple uses. I love things like that. So I pretty much did this with all of the colours. I had a solid 30 minutes of footage, so I have sped all of this up because no one needs to sit through that. And I certainly am not going to talk for half an hour about pouring paints, so I'm going to speed this up even more. That is extremely juicy, so I'm going to let this sit for a few days to dry before I touch it again, and then I will swatch out the colours once it is a bit more manageable. It's a few days later. They actually dried pretty quickly because it has been very dry here, and they are looking alright. There are a few that have a couple of little cracks in them, especially that Potter's Pink. That one always cracks, but they're not going to fall out or anything. Also a couple like the Aussie Red Gold and the Green Gold look like they could do with a bit more paint, so I'll probably top those up as well. I can just add a little bit more over the top of them and make them a bit more even with the others. They have shrunk a little bit, so they're just sitting underneath the metal edges, which is pretty good. I don't want them to be too full. I've ruled up a teeny tiny little swatch card which fits exactly in here, so I'm going to keep it in here for now. I'll probably lose it at some point because I will be wanting to use this little mixing tray, but it'll do for now. I'm just going to swatch the colours on here. I'm not going to bother writing the names or anything because it's too small. I did think about doing an in-depth talk about all of the different colours and their pigments, but really it's just a bit too much for me at the moment. What with recovering from COVID and travel plans coming up really quickly, I'm going to make it simple today, and you can see the colours that I am using. In my next video, I'm going to talk a bit more about these colours and do a swatch that has the names of them, so stick around for that one. I thought I would split it into two because in my next one I'm going to show you my entire travel kit. This is just some preparation. I needed to fill this palette up in advance with enough time for the paints to dry before actually travelling, and therefore not ending up with a giant mess. So I am swatching alternating squares here so that the paint has time to dry before I do the ones that are next to them, otherwise they all just run into each other. I've learned that the hard way many times. I still do it now when I'm being super lazy, but I thought I would try and keep this as neat as possible. There's that really bright opera pink. So I ended up putting these into Roigebiv order or rainbow order, and the lowest layer here are all of the earth tones because I like to have them together. I'm sure this palette is probably really bright for some people's taste. I know a lot of people like to have a lot more in the way of muted colours, but for me I just always love to have really bright colours in my paint palettes. And also I was thinking of colours that I might like to use in New Zealand. New Zealand is a much greener country than Australia is, so those two really bright greens are actually going to come in quite handy. I also included a dark perylene green because I always like to have a nice shadow green. Oh, that cobalt turquoise is stunning. It's one of my absolute favourite colours by Schmincke. Of course the weather could be absolutely terrible and everything will be a dull grey colour, but if that's the case I'll just mix all the colours together to make really neutral ones, so I have the best of both worlds. And I'm also definitely not going to be making a large mixing chart for these. I wanted to include a lot of convenience colours so that I don't have to mix, especially in a small palette like this, it's really difficult. And also in my sketchbook, I tend to just blob the colours on and mix them on the page. I will figure out what I like as I go along. And I wanted to have one dark neutral colour because it works so well with everything. Well, there we go, here's my entire palette. It's pretty bright. There are a couple of colours that do look a little similar to each other, and it's these two oranges, but this orange stays pretty much the same shade when you dilute it out, whereas the Australian red gold actually does go a lot more yellow when it's diluted out. It's hard to tell here because I've got quite a bit of mass tone on here, but once you wet it out it goes this beautiful yellow golden colour as well, which looks again different to the new gamboge. I just like to have a mix of yellows. I didn't go too many reds, although I'm noticing that the quinacridone rose actually does look quite similar to the opera rose, or opera pink I think it is, by Daniel Smith, but this one is a bit more fluorescent and I just thought I'd pick it and put it in there. Maybe I should have sat that one up there, but never mind, it's going there for now. I've also got a few neutral tones down the bottom, some browns and that potter's pink, and also a neutral black colour here. Quite a few blues in different shades and a couple of purples. Also quite a few greens. I have to have my dark green always, and a couple of aqua colours. I really love this Schmincke cobalt turquoise. It's such a beautiful colour. So this is a very bright palette of colours, but the thing is that it is much easier to make these more muted by mixing in opposing colours together than it is to have all muted colours and then you can't actually get a bright colour. So I like to start out bright and then tone them down rather than worrying about trying to go the other way. I also find that when I'm out and about there might be things, especially man-made objects, which are really bright colours, and I like to add those in. Also I like to add flowers and things like that. So I've just tried to go for a palette that can encompass pretty much most, if not all, situations. So from landscapes which are more neutral to brighter flowers, maybe the clothing that people are wearing, things like that. So this is what I have in my little mini palette. I think it looks really awesome. I like all of the colours. I don't know how this mixing well is going to go. It's not very big. The other reason for having a lot of colours when you travel is that you can have all of these convenience mixes and not have to worry so much about mixing paints together. So that's another bonus for having more colours. I tend to just use them straight like this, and maybe I will mix the paints together on the actual paper rather than in a mixing well. I haven't yet decided which sketchbook I'm going to swatch these in, so for today I'm going to do a little painting on this off-cut piece of watercolour paper that I have. It's got a Canson Moulin du Roi watermark on it, but if I flip it over you can't really see it that much, so I'll just paint over it. You can see this is from a much larger piece because it still has the rough edges. I think I'll tape it down and just do a little painting just to test out the set and see what I can come up with. I've drawn a quick sketch on here. I've taped it around the edges with some very skinny washi tape rather than sticking it completely to the table because I do like to move things around. I've got a few little brushes here. I might get a thicker brush, I'm not too sure, but I'll start with these. This one in particular is a sable and it usually holds a lot of water. Starting out with a bit of water on the paper, I'm doing a bit of wet on wet technique here, and my largest flower, which is the focal point, it looks like a giant circular blob for the moment. I will be coming back to that with more layers, but I like to cover the whole page with a lighter first layer, almost like an underpainting, and just figure out what colours I want to use in different areas. The leaves aren't all just bright green, they had a lot of orange and burnt sienna in them, so I was able to use quite a few different colours to mix in there. I also added in some really bright phthalo green leaves as well, and there was one large burnt sienna leaf. So it's quite a mix of different colours in the reference photo, and I thought it would be a good one to showcase a lot of the colours in the set. You can see they're very bright, and this is just how I like to paint. I love bright colours, especially for floral paintings, which I do a lot of, and I just don't really care for neutral tones that much. For the most part, brighter colours inspire me a lot more, and as I mentioned before, you can always make them a lot more neutralised by mixing opposite or complementary colours together, such as if the red was too bright, I could add in a tiny bit of green to mute it down, and vice versa. The same with a blue-orange or a yellow-purple, all of those will help neutralise each other. I wanted to paint in a darker background, and that's where that deep perylene green really comes into its own. This is why I always like to have it in a palette. It's such a useful colour. I was also dropping in some Indian Throne Blue just to make it a little more interesting and not just one flat colour. And then I worked up the layers, and I actually really like how this painting turned out. That pink flower was a total disaster for quite a long time, but I thankfully managed to pull it back. I also did end up using a little bit of ink pen to outline some of it. It just felt like it needed something, and I wanted to make it pop a bit more. Overall, I'm really happy with the colours I chose for this palette. I think it's going to be really great for travel, and I think it's also incredibly versatile. It has a lot of different colour options, and will hopefully cover everything that I intend on painting. What that is, I don't know yet. I guess we'll find that out in the future. And I'm done. Well, I used most of the colours in this painting, not all of them, but quite a lot, and I am having to remember how to use watercolour paint after using a lot of gouache lately, but it came out quite well, and I enjoyed using this little set. Really, it's not super great for doing a lot of big mixes or washes or anything like that, but for a small travel palette, it should be pretty good. I think I'm going to fill up some more of these just to make sure that everything is nice and full. You can see I've got a bit of a dent in that perylene green there. And I will probably do a second video swatching these into the sketchbook that I decide to travel with, and I will show you the travel kit that I'm intending to take away on our next holiday. So don't forget to subscribe to check out more videos coming really soon. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also leave a comment letting me know what you think of the colours that I chose. Would you choose different colours? What are they? Because I'm always curious to know what other people like to travel with. These are the sort of colours I tend to gravitate towards, and I find that I use the most. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye.